Hess. Here. Carrie Millette.
Here.
Victoria Newport.
Here.
Rick Smith. Howard Solomon.
Here.
All right, we can all stand for the pledge.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comment. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Criticism of individuals is not in order. Do you have any cards? All right. Board committee reports and correspondence? Anybody? All right. Okay, possible approval of dismissal of Ryan Brown. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the dismissal of Ryan Brown. Roll call, please.
Brenda.
I'm sorry, do I have a motion?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Speaker in favor.
Yes.
Mary Hess.
Yes.
Carrie Millette.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Next, we have presentations. DeKalb Oval Workforce Development Consortium presentation, Jean Vogel and Tamara Lober.
Oh, Jean is here. I will
Yeah, I
get
thought
it.
she came.
I will get it. I will get it.
Yeah. Oh, here she is.
You're on
Yep.
the seat, James. Here's James.
Would you like me to introduce you?
He cleans
For
up
those
nice.
of you who do not know Jean Vogel, he is with what started as the Workforce Summit. He is housed at DeKalb High School. He serves 5 districts in the county.
4 districts in KC. So
4 districts in KDC in the county. It was a result of a 3-year workforce summit that involved the superintendents from all the different school districts and just trying to connect the business, particularly manufacturing, to the schools. It had to do with, Mary, you were you part of the workforce summit?
In some parts, yes.
Okay, so yeah, it was a long process. So as a result, the manufacturers made a decision to create a position to have a liaison for all the school districts so that we could intertwine with our curriculum and offer to our students, just giving them an understanding of what's out there for them. So we fortunately have Jean housed at DeKalb High School, so we get to see a lot of him. So he's here with Zach Elliott to talk about what they do at the school.
I have a little dump drive for.
I think she has it on here for
So
you.
we're good to go? Okay.
Does she? Oh, is it on there?
It's on your board agenda. Oh, Cindy, can you?
I can get it wrong.
Do you have a job card? Sure.
We're gonna go to presentation, folder for the school board, and then the PowerPoint. And then, yep. Slide deck. Esteemed members of the District 428 board, friends and acquaintances from DeKalb District who as people come in, I was like, oh, I know this person, I know that person. Jean Vogel, I'm an industrial workforce coordinator for the DeKalb Oval Workforce Development Consortium. Background, 40 years in print management. Mr. Bounds may have told you that when he talked to you about his digital press. Been all over the United States setting up and tearing down workplaces. when I was doing job searches, I would substitute teach. So I have short-term and long-term subbing in my background. Also metal fabrication and a whole bunch of auto technology. So I get a diversified background, and that serves me well in this capacity. As Tamara was telling you, about 3.5 years ago, I guess, education leaders and industry leaders got together and decided what they were going to have as a workforce of the future. What does this new work person look like? They decided that perhaps they were short in soft skills, hard skills, career planning, communications, and marketing different opportunities that are available. This is the first time that DeKalb County and Ogle County have worked together on anything in economic development. And the goal of workforce development is nationwide right now. So this is the first. The question was, who's going to replace the baby boomers in the workforce? Who's going to fill jobs generated by reshoring of manufacturing? Who's going to be ready for new industry when it comes into town? Depicted by the silos, the industrial leaders and the educational leaders defined what was needed to create the workforce of the future. The end result was the industrial workforce coordinator and a beta project, something that had never been done before. Now we're entering the third year, so we must be doing something right. There are 3 key words I'd like you to remember tonight: expose, educate, and employ. Most of the students that I encounter have no idea what's behind the walls of the buildings they pass on their way to school. They have a limited knowledge of career paths, but they're especially fond of those that they've been exposed to, which are teachers, administrators, firemen, policemen, retail workers, doctors, and dentists. Some want to go to college, and they're having a great time in the educational system. Others is, what do I have to do to get out of school? The question is, what are you going to do when you get out of school? I have no idea, I just need to get out of school. However, a quick look tells you that they can make stuff. They know what it is as long as they can take it apart and put it back together. They're logical, they're mechanical, and they can envision real processes. Slide 3. We expose students by taking them to the International Manufacturing Show at McCormick Place. Quite a motley crew there after a day of dashing around McCormick Place. The car on the right is actually printed. It's a 3D car. The engine and the braking system, of course, are not, but the balance of the car has all been printed on 3D printers. We use tools like career cruising for exploration, and soon to be defunct Kish Career Link. Slide 4, please. Our first tour of the year aligns itself with the National Manufacturing Day. This year will be October the 2nd. Group on the left is at CST. You might know some of those smiling faces. I think you'll see Brandon Holly and Hayden LaPointe and Zach in there. On the right is Bob Lawrence, who is a longtime instructor at Kishwaukee College and Kishwaukee Education Consortium. What else do I do? You may find me at an FFA judging, in the classroom doing mock interviews, making presentations to KDC students on how to get a job and keep it, coaching students first time looking for jobs. Could be anywhere, anytime, doing anything to help a student get into the workforce. Early spring, we go on the Assemble Your Career Tour. We tie that along with NIU Engineering. Local industries once again open their doors to the students. We try and move all the students around so in a 3-year segment, they don't get to visit anywhere twice. It's always something different. Zach, who's with me tonight, happened to visit Crestwood, which is a Cortland operation. They build shredding machinery. It's an international operation. Of course, I collect the heavy equipment and machining processes and all that. I had heard that, so in the process, he's been working there through the summer with Jack Crestwood operation. I also assist DHS administrators with the career fair. This year we had 40 different companies there. But it's not the 40 companies that I'm proud of, it's the 16 different career clusters that were all represented. Through ag, logistics, medicine, all of them. So we had good representation from that. But not only DeKalb area, but also Rochelle. Slide 6 is a list of all the companies. Not a complete list by any means. These folks either help financially, open their doors to students, provide speakers when they ask. And of course, like I said, here's Zach. Do you have any questions at all? For us, Tamara said 4 minutes. Barry?
So how do students get to you? Is it in participate in these things? Is it through counselor referrals? Is it just by chance?
Counselors, teachers, by chance, sign up to go on tours. I focus a lot on the KEC students, the automated engineering, technology, and welding students. We always seem to interact.
So are you primarily dealing with juniors and seniors?
I would say yes, but freshmen sneak in there all the time and they want to go here, go there, and I don't say no to anyone. If I can get them along and I got a room on the bus, I try and take them along.
Jerry?
Yeah, do you get into the junior high, middle school?
Yes, I do get into the middle school. Last year we had a foray into middle school.
Clinton Rosette.
Clinton Rosette, yeah. So, and it was up at Kingston. I get around, so the schools kind of get mixed up for me. So,
And what about the employers? Do they have any requests for a student that gets hired either as an intern or as an employee to go on with continuing education
Yes.
while they're in the
they got
workforce?
first dibs. There's programs, custom aluminum products, Greenleaf, Textron. Jack and I have been talking about Crestwood perhaps getting some kind of assistance. Ideal Industries has them, Dry Rock has them. So yes, there are in fact opportunities. And if a student matches up well with the company and they really like them, of course, they have first dibs on
Hey,
it. Nice to see you again. We were
So
talking
at
in the expo.
Genoa, right?
Yeah, Genoa
Yes.
Expo.
Any other questions, or Zach, do you
Where's
want
that? No?
Zach, how do you like it?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
It's nice to learn about the process and how all the machines run and how you can take a bare metal and turn it into this massive shredder. That's fun.
Thanks from the DHS students over at SK. Anything else?
Just a comment for the board. I was thinking about this and other things, and we're talking about other ways to increase the graduation rate. And what I'd really like to see in the long run is feedback, so that when a student gets into an industry, into an employer, or if they go off to college, I'd love to see the longer run. We see, K or pre-K through 12 here, and we know it happens there. But for society, for the community, I would love to see an extension of what you're doing. Where we can know 2, 3, 4 years later, like Zach now has a relationship with Crestwood. How does that work out? 5 years from now, when they're 22, 23 years old or whatever, how's it working for them? So that we can reset, understand whether we're doing the right thing or not, or if we have to turn a little this way or a little that way. So that's something to think about just going forward.
Well, we're in the process of developing a trackable database with Kishwaukee College. And once it gets beyond college and then you pass the first job, then I don't know what we're
It's hard,
doing.
yeah. No, I was thinking earlier today, I said, let's pay them. Let's send out a letter, just like an alumni association does, right? They want to get money back into the college the kids graduated from, right? Let's send out a letter. I don't know where the funds are coming from for this. But, let's give them $20. Fill out this survey and send it back. just a wild idea right now, but somehow if we could get that information back, it would be good for the community if we could get some real hard data on stuff like that.
In general, as we make placements from out of DHS or other high schools, are you finding that the curriculum matches up to needs?
As what you learned in school, applicable to what you do in the Crestwood?
Yeah, especially math, but the thing that's helped me the most at Crestwood is the kids classes I'm taking, but that's because the kids class is engineering and it's exactly what my job is.
Another gentleman I invited along was Zach Mater. Zach just graduated from DHS. Zach set up at banner up signs in Sycamore, walked right in and started designing signs and putting them up. And yes, Mr. Bounds had him very well prepared to go in that position. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Two good examples. Thanks so much.
Thank you both.
Okay, non-business consent agenda.
Yes, I would make a motion to remove the ombudsman point from the non-business consent agenda and vote on it separately.
Do you have a motion? So, second?
And I move that we amend the personnel act.
We should do this one, one at a time.
Oh, yeah.
So do we have a second on Carrie's motion?
You shouldn't need one, but you have it.
Okay, we got it. Okay, discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to explain my rationale
Yeah.
for doing that. The ombudsman program, like KEC that we just heard a little bit about, it is an external, maybe I shouldn't say external, but it is an additional program to our normal curriculum, our normal programming. And I think obviously we want to try and increase the graduation rate. And this is one avenue that can help with that. But personally, I don't feel that I have enough information yet to make a valid choice on whether to increase the budget during times of deficits. So that's my motivation or rationale for wanting to see this separated out from the consent agenda, all the rest of the items in the consent agenda, no qualms.
So any questions, why don't we ask Christine?
Do you
Yeah,
have any questions that I?
yeah, Christy, I thought that when we get to the point, I guess, is this the point now? Well, we'll see what this motion was.
Sure.
But, the reason I wanted to remove it is because when it's in the consent agenda, the discussion may or may not happen in a timely enough way to inform on the entire list. So yeah, I have specific questions. I don't know whether you can answer them all at once, and that may be partly my issue individually. But the ombudsman, how different is it from KEC? I would like to get a global view of where our dollars are going, how many dollars per student we're spending, and what the payback ratio, what the cost benefit ratio is. I brought some of this up when you presented it as an informational item last time. I just don't feel like I have enough deep knowledge of these programs to know what is and what isn't the most cost effective.
Well, Carrie, I think that I don't have the numbers for you to point out, but I do have, we did put on our board agenda this year to go through all of our alternative ed opportunities or options for students. But what I can tell you is that I did do some researching myself this last couple of weeks and have learned that what I said earlier last couple of weeks ago regarding our opportunities for our DeKalb high school students is truly looking at the non-traditional student that isn't successful in our current programs at DHS, then looking at where they're falling, where their challenges are, where are the struggles. If it is something, I want you to know that KEC is made up of actually three different components. When you hear KEC, you might be talking about what Mr. Fogel was just talking about, which would be some of our career and tech opportunities, right? That's actually part of our traditional offerings, but it's an extension of that over at Kish College. Terrific opportunity, right? Then there are two other offshoots at KEC. Have you ever been out there?
Yes.
Okay, so you know the building, nice new building, lovely. There's one that is for students who are truant, okay? And that is an opportunity to access their education still in a different setting. And then there's others, it's for students who are, it's for safety, and they're struggling because they've been suspended, or they're very near to being an expulsion, okay? And so it's an opportunity to, a second chance, to have smaller class size, to get the necessary social work as well, to boost them and hopefully get them to either returning to school or finishing their education at KEC, called RSS. Okay? But then we have students who don't fall in those two categories. They're just non-traditional students that, for whatever reason, aren't able to respond to the classroom at the high school, right? And are looking at a more, they are responding to more of the, an online opportunity through Ombudsman, with the opportunity to access some additional career support through the social work. Okay, still connected though to the school with one of our personnel going there. That would be the Ombudsman.
So if I can ask a question now. Thank you so far for the explanation.
We have another opportunity, another alternative actually. Okay. Am I doing okay? Yes.
You're right on.
We have one other opportunity that I would talk to you about too, and that's Edgenuity. And that's in the walls of DHS, Edgenuity, and it is also an online opportunity to make up coursework, or for some, to move ahead in coursework. But certainly that is an opportunity that can be, some are doing it during the day, but many are also doing that from 3 to 5 o'clock, Monday, Thursday. Okay? So,
No,
that's all right.
The Edgenuity, if you look at the 4-year graduation and then you look at the 5-year graduation, I don't know if it was last year that we were at 88.5, almost 90% on the 5-year. And a lot of the kids that don't make it in 4 years make it through these alternative opportunities. Edgenuity is a big one. Ombudsman, JC.
Yeah, so in my mind, trying to capture all the different ways that you can be educated in 428, you know, and where these kids are coming from and where they fit best into which program.
Mhm.
One of the questions then is specifically for the Ombudsman program.
yes,
And thank you for the information on Ingenuity. I may have a note on it somewhere, but it's like almost absolutely fresh to me. But anyway, as far as Ombudsman go, where did these kids come from? I mean, the students that are participating in the Ombudsman program, did they come up through the quote ordinary ranks, the typical ranks in the lower grades? But somehow
Yes.
when they get to high school, they can't do it, the ordinary path.
yes, that's my understanding. Dr. Gill, did you want to, or?
Would all agree.
And I think that they
See a
struggled,
lot of nodding.
they struggled in elementary and middle school as well. I mean, if Tim would could tell you from being at the middle school, he can identify the students. In fact, some of the students from middle school may go to KC as well. That's when it starts.
Okay, and there's different components to the issues, as you mentioned, safety
Yes.
or attendance or
Whatever
whatever,
factors.
right? But how much of this could you say is due to awarding what's the right term? Passing the child on to the next grade level at the end of every year.
Social promotion.
Right, yeah, rather than holding them back and saying you have to repeat this year because you're not qualified yet. I mean, I'm wondering, is this a part of, this is something that I've been very interested in for 10 years or so. You know, that we seem to be sending kids on ahead when they're not clearly ready for their next level. And I'm wondering, how does that, if that's at all involved, how is it involved in any of these extra programs like Congress?
I would say that I would only be speaking from my experience and my point of view when I say, and so this is not reflective of ombudsman, but truly, Carrie, what you just said is it is not an issue of social promotion. It is many, not just one, it is many factors that are compounding upon these students. Their lives are more complicated than we can even imagine. So to narrow it to social promotion, that's not possible. It's too many factors that are just, am I wrong about that? Just compounding and coming at these kids from, and you can't just point your finger at family, it's just coming at them in many different ways.
We had a presentation on ombudsman on April 15th, 2014, and the presentation, you can access it.
Yeah, I think I have notes on it actually.
I mean, I recall that question coming up, and, you know, some examples that are provided are, you know, a young person who has to work to support their family, and this is a way for them to stay in school. A young person who has had a child of their own, and this is a way for them to stay in school. So that this kind of customized thing will help them to complete high school.
And many of them have experienced failure for multiple years, and just retaking a class over and over and over again, it's not gonna work. I mean, the modality of learning is not.
That's why I asked the question
it's
about,
a
are
different
they being
modality.
promoted, you know, to ill effect? I mean,
At the high school, you have to pass the class
Yeah.
to move forward, period. There's no social promotions based on how many credits you have.
Yeah.
We might have a third-year student with first-year credits.
Carrie, we had, oh, I'm so sorry.
So all I was gonna say is that's when the counselors, social workers, administration, they all work together and say, you know, having the student repeat algebra for the third time is not going to work.
And that's maybe why in 11th grade it seems to almost double the number of students.
Exactly, because that's when they take algebra too. But the issue is I tend to realize that they are not the traditional learners, that they need a different modality, whether it be through electronic media, something more special, like ingenuity, like so.
It doesn't seem logical, well, maybe a little bit, but not completely logical to me that they can make it through the system for 8 or 9 or 10 years and then fall down the last 2 or 3 years. But then admittedly, there's things that happen in a young person's life in those later teen years. I guess I just don't quite understand it all yet, but I'm wondering, I'm worried, you know, whether or not we're missing something at the earlier stages that we ought to be doing so that we can help mitigate the problem a bit later. I'm more and more convinced that K through 3 or pre-K through 3, you know, is the ultimate crunch time. If you don't get it then, you're in big trouble thereafter.
That's why we put a heavy emphasis on pre-K too.
Yeah.
Christy, did you want to make another comment?
I was just going to say we wouldn't have the numbers in those classes that have to repeat it if we were socially promoting students. They're not, as Dr. Mueller said, they can't, we're not going to pass students unless they meet the standards and the criteria. So that's that.
Yeah, well,
numbers.
I don't know, I mean, what's Parkman do for us? I mean, the testing is different at the different grade levels.
Right.
Yeah, okay, we're getting into philosophy. So,
Okay, so what we're gonna take now is on Carrie's motion, he wanted this removed from the non-business consent so that we could vote on it as a separate item. So So what we're gonna vote on now is that the Board of Education approve the increase in ombudsman's cost to include the fee for an additional part-time social worker, 30 hours. We already had a motion, so,
Discussion, so.
yeah, so that's a roll call then.
Howard Sullivan,
Yes.
Vicky Heard in favor,
Yes.
Mary Hess,
Yes.
Chair Millet,
Abstain.
Victoria Newport,
Yes. Okay.
And I'd like to move that we amend the personnel action item on the consent agenda to include the hiring of April Drake and Abigail Zubray Pakistan as part-time office associates to serve at the district office.
Second, okay. So now, a vote please.
We're on the non-business consent.
On the motion.
Yeah, vote on the motion.
Vicky Heard in favor,
Yes.
Mary Hess,
Yes.
Chair Millet,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Howard Sullivan,
Okay, now we're going to approve the non-business consent agenda. That the Board of Education approve the non-business consent agenda items A through G excluding D. Do I have a motion? So moved. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Mary Hess,
Yes.
Chair Millet,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Howard Sullivan,
Yes.
Vicky Heard in favor,
Yes. Okay.
Okay, now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Jennifer Talich, who is our new principal at Lincoln Elementary School. Jennifer comes to us from Elgin School District D46. She was the principal at Hillcrest Elementary with how many children?
There was 665 living in the class.
665, no assistant principal. A very high needs school. It's about 90% low SES and minority students. So she brings a great wealth of experience. But she's also coming full circle. Jennifer's a graduate of DeKalb High School, and her father and stepmother were educators in the district. So I just wanted to give her a tremendously warm welcome here. So.
I'm just very excited to be back in the district, to be able to get back to the community that I grew up in. And it's no staff. I've already got staff calling and wanting to meet. So we'll be doing that a little bit this week and ready to get started next Monday, officially.
I knew you had something to say.
Of course. I want to apologize for the crazy roller coaster ride we gave you last time.
That's okay.
The motion went right over my head, and if it weren't for Doug, we would have had a problem, but we fixed it up, but you'd already left, so
No, that's all right.
sorry
That's
about
all right.
that. We're glad you're with us.
It's all good.
Great to have you on board,
Thank you.
Jen. Thank you.
Okay, business and finance, approval of tentative budget 2015-2016 school year. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the fiscal year 2015-2016 budget for public display in anticipation of adoption on September 15, 2015. Do I have a motion? So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right. Roll call?
Mary Hess,
Yes.
Chair Millet,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Howard Sullivan,
Yes.
Vicky Heard in favor.
Yes. Did you want to discuss?
So not that you haven't seen enough of this,
Okay.
but there are some new pieces of information, and this actually starts the formal process of the tentative budget, and then it goes on display, and then we have 30 days in between there, and then there'll be a public hearing, and then you have to formally adopt. So this is all the formality now of, this is what we're ready with, all the numbers that we could get at this point in time, which is continually changing. And Cindy is going to start us off on that. And there are some changes with FTE that she'll explain as well.
So basically, and Andrew just mentioned about the budget and where we're at in the process. And so basically what a budget is, I'm sure you're all aware, but basically we use it as a financial planning tool. And of course, plans can change, and we know that it seems like every day we're getting some new information and there's a change going on. So we keep track of those things. We use it as a tool for projections and planning to gauge our spending, so we know where we're at with that. We estimate revenues that we hope to receive, and we build it on estimates of what we will be spending. And we always use historical as well as actual information to come up with those numbers. Next slide. We do our accounting on a modified accrual basis. I won't bore you with that, the difference between cash and accrual, but basically we used to be on a cash basis 10 years ago. We switched to modified accrual in fiscal year 2006. And it's just a better indicator from period to period where you stand and to look at trends. It's just a lot easier to do it if you're on modified accrual. So basically what that means is you record your revenue when you received it and expenses when paid. But then at fiscal year end, we do some shuffling of things. We account for revenue up to 60 days after the year end to because especially with the state of Illinois, the last few years, I would say the last 5 years, have been late in giving us payments. Like not our state aid, we typically get that, but some of our personnel reimbursement, transportation reimbursement, some bigger dollars. So we don't receive it by June 30th, but we do receive it typically July and August. There was 1 year we didn't receive it until December, but actually this year we did receive all the money in July. So we record that revenue as the June 30th revenue, not as the next fiscal year. So it's all within the same fiscal year. So we do wait those 60 days for revenue to come in that we will post to the previous fiscal year. Again, what we do on the property tax revenue side is we defer property taxes, which not a lot of districts do this because we do this to be conservative and for so we're proactive with our cash flow. But the tax levy that we're receiving now for 2014, we receive it in 2015. We get about half of it by June 30th, but that's for the next fiscal year's expenditures. Then we get the other half typically over the summer and in September. So we push those dollars that we receive, let's say in May and June, into the next fiscal year. So we're not spending that money in fiscal year 14 or 15, we're spending, using and utilizing in 16, so we defer those dollars out. So, and another thing that we do with expenses, if we're also getting invoices in July and August that were for previous year's expenditures. So we are expensing those in the previous fiscal year. Even though we're paying them in July and August, we expense them in the previous fiscal year. So what that does, bottom line, is as of June 30th, our fund balance is the lowest point it'll ever be in the fiscal year. You have other districts that are maybe cash basis or maybe even they can be modified accrual and not defer. That would be their highest point. For us, we're always at the lowest point at 630. And as of the end of June, the state did owe us $7.5, but we did receive it all by the end of July. So they don't owe us anything right now, which is actually an improvement from previous years. Usually we have to wait a couple more months. So the budget building process, again, it seems like it happens constantly for us, but really it starts in January when the board adopts the budget calendar. Then throughout the February, March, April, the spring, we have meetings, we prepare building and department budgets, and we do some refining, and we look at our long-term projections as well. In April, we receive and review our final tax extension because that's a big part of our revenue. About 60% of our local dollars, or actually all our revenue comes from our taxes, so that's an important piece. May and June, we present tentative and updated budgets, which we've done pretty much almost every board meeting, it seems lately. June and July, we finalize the budget and we summarize expenditures and revenues with assumptions that we know of. July and August, which is basically right now, we finalize those revenues and expenditures. And then September is when we hold our public hearing and we adopt the budget. Then after that, we have to develop a state budget form that we submit to the state. So they have to get that 30 days after we adopt our budget. So this is where we were at as of the last board meeting, July 21st. So we were at about 78 million in projected operating revenues, about 79 million in operating expenditures for about a $1.8 million deficit, which would leave us with 20,338 or 20 million-ish in fund balance, so about 25.63% of expenditures, operating balance to expenditures. Now FTE, actually this has changed as of today. So these things do change very quickly. When all the dust is settled, I'm not going to go through the details of what went up and down, but basically we're actually looking a little better. We thought as of this date it was going to be 0.2 FTE remaining, but we actually are going to have 2 remaining. Because there was some attrition and with enrollment levels and needs,
there's 2 people we will not, so we might have a little bit of a cushion.
That's the first time in years, right?
Yeah, probably. Well, we're still, but that's wait tomorrow, right? The breath. But if that, but that's how,
That's up today.
yeah, that's how fluid this is in companies change, but we do stay on top of it. But we always like to keep that 5 in there as a cushion. And so far, that seemed to have worked out the last few years, so hopefully we'll stay on track with that. So this will, I'm not gonna go through every single line item here, but just so you know where we were at and where we are going. So as of, the first column is as of the last budget update, where we're at with our revenues. And this is for all our funds, including the non-operating funds, which would be like debt service and capital projects and life safety funds. But here, we break it out by local sources, state sources, and federal sources. So we have as of July 21st where we're at, and then I have an adjustments column where I've gone through as of 6:30, and now that we've gotten a lot of our polls done, I can really gauge where we're at fiscal year end, especially with revenues and the state giving us the monies that were owed to us. So I've adjusted up and down areas where I felt that we were pretty much needed to just get to more precise in terms of our revenues. So that's what that adjustment column is. And then we have the final tentative budget, which again is tentative. It could change by the time we adopt it, but this is pretty as close as we're going to get at this point. So the next is our pie chart that we've seen probably over and over, which is probably not a bad thing, but it's always good to know where we're at with our federal, state, and local sources. Again, local sources being about 62% of our revenue, primarily that is property taxes. Federal sources, which is really our title grants, National School Lunch Program, and state, which is general state aid and some state-funded grants, special education reimbursement, transportation reimbursement. So that's our tentative operating revenue for fiscal year 15-16. We do the same with expenditures. So again, I did the same thing. This is where we're at as of July 21st, and we have this broken out again by all funds and by objects is what the salary, benefits, purchase services, materials, capital outlay. For state and county purposes, they call those objects. And I, again, did the same thing as I did with the revenue, looked at where we were at and adjusted up or down where necessary, and then came up with our tentative budget for expenditures. And again, here's our pie chart for our operating expenditures. So obviously the biggest piece, we are a service business, our salaries and benefits, which are about 73.5% of our total expenditures. The next largest piece would be our purchase services, which is our transportation, our food service, shower wells, and other contracted services, liability insurance, legal, those types of things, workers' compensation. Next is our tuition area, which has a lot of those outside special education tuition, the KC is in there, the on-button is in there, those types of things. And then our materials and capital outlay. So that's our pie chart for our operating expenditures. Here's a summary of our tentative operating revenues and expenditures, which gets us actually a little bit better than where we were back 2 weeks ago, of a deficit of $871,000. So we look at what our estimated fund balance will be at 6/30/15, then our operating deficit, and then we're also doing a transfer from working cash to capital projects to cover, now that 6/30 is over and we've done all those improvements that we were going to do, like Tyler and other areas, we need to move monies from working cash to capital projects to cover some of those costs, now that we know the dust has settled on those numbers. So bottom line, as of 2016, we're projecting an operating fund of $20,150,000, which is 25.11% of expenditures, which is within our fund balance policy of 15 to 25% of expenditures.
So again, real quick, because we presented to you some cost-saving measures have now been folded in there with the reorganization of food service and facilities. And I know these are very difficult decisions to make, but it is taking that proactive approach to at least trying to mitigate some of that deficit. And that pays us dividends moving forward. The earlier you can curb that deficit, the better off in the long run, as we look at our projections that, assists in closing that. I know it won't completely wipe out the deficit, but it certainly does aid in mitigating the damage moving forward.
Yeah, those have all been incorporated. So the next slide is another summary of the tenant budget with all funds showing revenues and expenditures, what the projected surplus and deficit are. Fund transfers, because we have monies that for our tax levy that are kind of held in that transportation fund, so we need to transfer those out into education and operations. And then this is also showing the transfer from working cash to capital projects. So, and then it just shows our adjusted surplus deficit and then what our estimated beginning balance is for this fiscal year, as well as what the estimated ending balance will be. This is a quick summary. And then this is an historical perspective of where we get. And this is basically 10 plus years out, which is crazy. I can't believe it's been that long, but since we went to modified accrual. So this is a really good summary of where we were and where we're at this point. And then where our fund balance to expenditure ratio has been since that period of time. And what's kind of nice, you can see that updip in 2011, that's when we received the construction grant dollars. So we did get a nice little increase in fund balance there. But as you can see, we've really been doing a very good job of keeping that line very flat. I mean, you'd love to see it like this, but keeping it flat and over in the 10 to $15 million area on average has been very helpful to help us. Now, some of the stuff that's happened, I mean, since 2008, when we really saw loss in revenue and our value of property.
And we were just talking about this because it's easy to show a picture of it, but I think we'll touch on some points later on of really some huge shifts that we have made, well, in the classroom to basic operating types of expenditures to keep that line the way it is. Because when we look at our projection model, oftentimes people will say, well, why do you see it falling, and then this happens? It's because of the decisions that are being made, likewise, as you all made at the last board meeting, that allows us to continue moving forward with that flat pace. Had we have not done those things, and this is sometimes where people don't make those connections, when you're doing that forecasting, you're saying, if we continue to move along the same exact lines we are today, this is where we will end up. And so we have been extremely proactive in the approach to say, let's not let that happen and change the trajectory of where we believe we will land. And as you see, as we've said, 10 years of holding the line when you've seen the way the state has not made payments, slowed payments, all of the such, to be able to maintain that. And I know it's not without some hurt around the district. The fact of the matter is that we're still here 10 years later and have fund balance and have been able to maintain a lot of the great programs that we have to offer students is, of course, with not having the support of the school board making those tough decisions. So to you and previous boards, we thank you for that, because at the end of the day, it is those tough decisions that you have to take action.
Questions for you, Cindy?
I think can I go?
Yeah, well, and so as the story continues, the one thing again, and this demonstrates it as well, what has happened to us over the past years, because the state has not had the money to allocate towards schools. So while things have been progressively getting better, they didn't come without hurt. And as you can see, over the last 5 years, it's been with a loss personally to our school district of a little over $7.1 million. And for every 1%, again, just being reminded of that proration that we get hit, that's about almost $200,000, $190,000 for every percent that moves on that proration. And so the next slide actually demonstrates, as we love putting our numbers to pictures, and so more people, I think it gets ingrained. I know, we love this stuff, I understand that, but everybody feels that way. But looking at it like this, it just somewhat simplifies it a little bit. So you can see the history of when this has happened, that the red bar represents what we expected to get from general state aid, and then the orange bar represents what we ended up getting for general state aid. And then the line going across is a cumulative balance of what has been lost because of those prorations moving forward. So it is a pretty large hit that we have taken to a school district that is moderately dependent on general state aid. Then the next slide, again, as somewhat the conversation hasn't always been focused on, is our transportation. Over the years, the same thing has been happening under transportation. We have an expectation of what transportation reimbursement would look like, and then the orange bar represents what we actually received. And then, of course, the line represents the cumulative amount of what has been lost. So on transportation, that's been another $2.9 million loss of revenue over the years. And for those who don't remember, we have tried a myriad of things in transportation to find more efficiencies. We developed one-time shuttle buses, which took a great deal of manpower to actually get off the ground floor and continue. That year we moved away from that, went back to the traditional bus stops, but then made gathering places. So students actually had to walk further to a bus stop. But this is the reason why. Because had we have not done those things, we're spending more and more of this whole pot of money on transporting our students to school rather than being able to use those funds in the classroom. So that's not to be forgotten, that there's also a loss under our transportation reimbursement. The next slide then demonstrates that sometimes people have forgotten what type of state revenue has kind of fallen off the charts or has been reduced. So this, again, builds a historical perspective of what we used to receive in state revenues and then what has been on a downturn or completely zeroed out. And then below it are just some of those types of grants, from vocational to bilingual to school lunch and breakfast to driver's ed to pre-K, reading improvement, ADA safety, and teacher mentoring grants. And then you can see below are the numbers listed as to what we received and what it has fallen down to. Another interesting point is not just about the expenses and the state revenue, but what we here also can do for investments. Now, when you take a look at previously, what we were able to earn in 2007 in interest earnings, and back in those days, we had far less money that we're sitting on as of today. And we were earning in excess of $1.2 million. And today, and even back in 2011 and 12, when we received the $21 million and made our investments back then, the little minuscule money we are making on interest earnings when it's really less than 1% that you're getting to invest money. So, right, yes, because we don't dabble in the stock market, people. Our money is invested in CDs, and that is by school code of what you're limited to invest your monies in. Then some of the other information we wanted to share that we just started incorporating last year in some of these slides, as we've been talking about certain poverty levels and then how that somewhat changes just the look in the face of the district. And for all other instances, it's students who are coming from low poverty just have higher needs in certain areas. So it's not a level playing field of all students look alike. when you start exceeding the 50% level of poverty level, it is somewhat of a game changer. That's a large part of your population that has different types of needs. And so you can see how that has been creeping up and up. Now, the state doesn't have yet reported for 2015, but we do know in 2015, our free and reduced price lunch students were just a little bit under 60%. I believe we were at about 59.8%, and hovering in that area. How far that poverty level will again, in 2016, we may see a different level of that happening because there are different factors that fell into place. Actually, in 2015, when they did direct certification of families coming from the state who had some type of government subsidy or Medicaid, it was all included. And that was the first time they inserted the Medicaid folks in that, and so the numbers were driven up. And now this year, for some reason, they excluded those Medicaid families. So about 700 students dropped off and now would have to apply the old-fashioned way, so to speak, by paper, and it's solely based on their income level. It's not automatic that you're Medicaid, that you get free and reduced price lunch. So there were some different qualifiers for the last 2 years that may change the dynamics of those numbers, that you should just understand why those percentages move the way they have. And the next slide, at one point in time, the board was interested in comparison to other districts, how we look now. Again, this is skewed a little bit because of course we are the largest district within DeKalb, but looking at DeKalb County and the other districts and where they sit with their poverty levels versus where we sit. I think the one thing though we look at is that trending line all across has been a continuous uptick of more and more families in the free and reduced price lunch category. And then the next slide, again, we just build on top all of our operating funds on there, and then how you can see how that's represented. Of course, a big jump again that goes from 2010 to 2011 is when we received the $21 million worth of construction grant money. But at least this way you could see what makes up on a bar each fund of that. Then again, just as part of the budget progress monitoring, last year we put together a budget book which includes narratives from each of our principals of the focus on their buildings and how they spend their money. We are starting to look at bridging the budget with student performance data, and we'll build a dashboard this year for one specific initiative, for the curriculum technology initiative. But as this starts to unfold, we'll be able to tie and look at those related areas like that. Of course, a big driver of this is to maintain or sustain our improved bond rating on a go-forward basis, which that's going to be a challenge in its own, just living in the state of Illinois. And then we are still currently in negotiations with our facilities, operations, and food service folks. So where we land with that at the end of the day would then be incorporated in here. And then we have that we alerted you to potential pension cost shifts that could come our way. And that would be in increments of 0.5%. We hope at the most if it ends up in our lap. And then the potential property tax freeze is a lot of discussion has been on the table, and if that would happen, just with a bigger punch in the stomach, that would be for all of us. And then the next slide again is just the history of all the budget reductions we have made. So when we talk about those projection models again, and why aren't we where we projected, is because as we look at those, we have been proactive in shifting that. And these are just, and I'm not gonna read them all to you, but, you can certainly read them up there. Everything from addressing and reducing, supplies, capital, to increasing class size, to not funding the technology department the way it used to be, to eliminating positions here at district office, to salary freezes, increasing student registration fees, again, testing different avenues in our busing routes to curb our costs there, and reviewing any contract renewal and all of the such as we move forward. And that's all the information I have to share with you this evening.
Yeah, you almost answered my question, I think. Well, not question, it's really more of a curiosity or suggestion, I guess. But the slope of the red line of the fund balance, right, in the earlier slide, right, that's always been one that I go back to. And the last slide you just showed, I was thinking earlier before you showed that slide, how nice it would be to see a little spike on that red line, under that red line, the point in time at which we saved X dollars and thereby kept the slope of that line more or less flat. Right? And used to say low-hanging fruit, right? I remember back in 07 or something like that when we talked about, how many pieces of copier paper can you save and stuff like that, right? Construction paper, all kinds of what I would think of as low dollar, not all so low dollar. But anyway, it's really almost deceptive to look just at that line, because you have kept the slope pretty much constant. I mean, it's now going downward. That's not a good thing. And we had that big spike from the 10 million out of the 21 million construction grant that got boosted. If it weren't for that, our ratio wouldn't be 25%. It'd be a lot less than that. Right? But anyway, I just think about that one red line, how I always like to go back to that just to look at the slope, because it gives me a really fast idea of how we're doing overall.
Right.
But now I'm thinking, okay, I need the derivative. I need to know, how did it get that way, right? And you just showed us without numbers, just line items.
Yes.
How it was able to be kept at some reasonable slope.
Right.
So that's the only suggestion that I have, maybe as a forecasting or a help going forward. Hey, can we do this? No, we already did that.
Right.
Or maybe it points to, can we do it again, or can we do some change of some similar thing? So anyway.
Absolutely, because I
just
think it is easily forgotten, and as boards change and different folks in administration come in and out, that we have addressed these things, and we started addressing them over 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when we started impacting the budgets. So, sometimes people think, well, why haven't you done those things? We have, and continue to do those things. And yes, so that's exactly why we decided to put a little historical perspective of these are all the things that have happened.
All right, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, renewal of food service agreement with Chartwell's. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve extending the food service contract with Chartwell School Dining Services for an increase of 0.8% CPI for the fiscal year 2015-16 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. All right, discussion? All right, roll call.
Vicky Herman Favorite,
Yes.
Mary Hess,
Yes.
Carrie Millett,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
All right. Next, we have criteria and timing for potential redistricting. Andrea.
Yes. So we know this ends up being a very sensitive and emotional issue as we'll start to bring more information forward. But I think an important piece of this is this has been 2 years in the making of our leadership team meeting, examining maps, demographics, looking at myriads of pieces of information. And in fact, prior to even 2 years ago, I will tell you that after the referendum, a big discussion point and topic was to create a new boundary for Founders Elementary School. So if you don't recall, we had Wright and Malta, and we sold Malta School. Malta students moved into Wright School. Wright School was then therefore transferred to the newly created Founders Elementary School. But it was a program at Wright School that was by lottery that you would get into that school. And so a lot of, I think, emotion from the referendum and the opening of schools and tweaking a bit of the boundaries had already occurred. And not to upset the whole Wright School model, we just, the school board at that time said, let those students finish up at Founders before we start moving kids around again. And because we had talked about boundaries, but they said, let's hold off on that. There's a lot of change that had already occurred within Malta, DeKalb, and Cortland. And let's just move with what we have, meaning let's put those students in, and then Founders became somewhat of that overflow school or just another school to place students where they didn't fit in other existing school boundaries. So there really are students coming from all over the district to Founders right now. There's a very little boundary line drawn right now that needed to be addressed. So by the time we are talking about implementing new boundaries would be in the 2016-17 school year. So we decided, because we know there is a lot of emotion tied into that, we would take a year of communicating, sharing information, examining the maps, and not implement the changes into the following year. So this was 2 years ago what the intent was, to let families kind of regroup, take in all the information, and then know it wouldn't be until the following year that they would be affected. Now, in doing that, I will tell you there was a lot of discussion even in leadership. Another complex part is making room for programs. So special ed classrooms, bilingual programs, where those are housed. At the time when we opened Cortland Elementary School, the new 4-section building, the boundaries in which Cortland had, I think, basically encompassed, did not fill that school. So at that time, it was a decision to be made to put the ELL program out there so that more students, albeit they had to be bused at that time, but at least there was room in that school to carry a program. Now it's time to kind of reevaluate, does all of this make sense, and are all our programs located in a place that is more centrally located for families, as well as do they make sense in some of the buildings that are smaller, which then end up overflowing over 265 students. So while this plan may not completely eliminate overflows, and it won't, it should help reduce the number of overflows that we have. So with that, we attached a document for you to take a look at as far as project objectives. And so in that project objective, it outlines about school overcrowding, examination of the attendance areas, imbalances in school uses, overcrowding, and the such. And then we listed primary objectives, which is every school should have a boundary that will primarily serve the K-5 populations that live within those boundaries. We also have that bilingual students and students participating in special education classes are assumed to continue in the existing school that they are enrolled in. So we're trying to address those issues. And then lastly, the redistricting is expected to take effect in fall of 2016, which is the 2016-17 school year. So again, it gives us a whole year to do this communicating and planning, but there's a timeline that we'll have attached. But in all of this, again, as we've been working with our demographer, well, the one who actually, he's the one who runs the GIS mapping system, Matthew Cropper. So we've enlisted his services, and he maps all of our students. And we know the demographic makeup of those students. And so he's shifting those boundaries so that we can look at the data of what that student population will look like within those boundaries. So in doing that, to kind of keep the emotion out, and I will tell you, as administrators sit in this room this evening even, it's emotional even for our administrators to look at this and the changes that will happen. And the one way that he has even guided us and we all agree to is we just have to come up with criteria, somewhat solid criteria of what we all agree to, and stick with somewhat removing that emotion so that it doesn't become personal of, I want this group of students or move that group of students. It's basically, here's an outline, and where they fall, they fall. But keeping these issues in the forefront. So we talk about balanced building utilization, and there's more detail behind that you can read. Minimizing the impact on students. You know, when we first went into this, we were trying to modify those boundaries so it would be least impactful to the lesser amount of students. So we weren't touching every kid and moving everybody around. And so Matthew even tracked how many students were going to be affected by each of these decisions that we were drawing on moving these boundaries. And then the use of major roads and national and natural boundaries whenever feasible to define an attendance zone. So looking for kind of clear-cut roads, main roads or crossroads, and sometimes didn't always make sense, but trying to make that delineation to somewhat of more visible division of who goes where. And that is rather difficult, I will tell you, when you get into some areas where you know, you don't have these expansive, nice, clear lines of a subdivision to a subdivision. Then maximize walkability. Again, so many families, as we hear, they live right across the street or 2 blocks away, yet they're being sent over to another school. Walkability is a very important factor of all of this. Also, as we just demonstrated, the cost of transportation and what we don't get reimbursed for. So any student who lives within 1.5 miles and under, unless there is a hazardous crossing area, they don't qualify for transportation. They are to walk to school. And that is how the state of Illinois defines who qualifies for ridership and who does not. And then establish clear feeder patterns and continuity. Efforts will be made to ensure an efficient system of school bus transportation. We looked at making all efforts to establish contiguous zones, make all efforts to minimize the division of clearly identifiable community components, such as apartments, residential subdivisions, and then to be mindful of the impact on demographics of school when redistricting if possible. So not to make a building just because the neighborhood around it could end up driving that 75 or 85% of that building becomes free and reduced. That was another issue, and I think data point that we were looking at to balance all of that out. So unless I think.
No, that was one of our, and I mean, those aren't necessarily in order of importance, because we do have to be very mindful of overall our free and reduced lunch population is about 60%. And strictly using just neighborhoods, we could end up with schools with 80 or 90% high poverty, and other schools might only have 10 or 15%. So that is one of the criteria you have to look at. Try to keep somewhere between most schools, like 50%. If we're average, it's about 60. Try to keep them between 50 to 70%. Not disproportionately overburden or overload one school with a high proportion of students on free and reduced price lunch, because again, it's not just the students in poverty. There's a lot of research about the density of poverty in a particular school. So If one school has, let's say, 10% of students in low FCS, they're probably going to fare better than if they were in a school with 90% students in low FCS. So we have to try to balance that out, just for correctly.
Go ahead, Mary. Will there be any adjustments made to the middle school? Or is this all elementary?
It's mostly elementary, but we did touch on middle school as well. So I will tell you, we have to refresh this data because we did just bring the middle school principals in to take a look at programs. Where one school, such as Huntley right now, houses more programs than Clayton Rosette. And is that really the best use or makeup of a building? And again, it is part of sharing some of that. You can't always do that equally, but you do have to really have that as a consideration.
What does Matthew Cropper say about the stability of the free reduced lunch population as families, as far as do they leave the district, do they stay in the district, and neighborhoods? Do they move from one neighborhood to another?
I can't speak to that, committing all of that information to memory, but we do have information on mobility, and our mobility really is within our district. It's not necessarily people leaving the district and coming in, although that happens for some reason from middle school on to high school. Not all of these students, it looks like, continue on. But a focus has been really the mobility that happens within our district. So families tend, at some point in time, they're moving, but they could be moving perhaps from Lincoln over to Jefferson boundaries or to Brooks boundaries. It's basically within.
We've also got another dynamic where if we look at our percentage of students on free reduced price lunch by grade level, it's disproportionately weighted kindergarten through second grade. I mean, kindergarten through second grade, you might have 20-30% of each of those grades, but when you get to high school, virtually none of them. I mean, free reduced lunch percentage at the high school, something like 12 to 14%. We don't know what, and that's something we've looked at it multiple ways, and it's just, that I believe is more inter-district, not intra-district.
Yeah. Okay, so the stability, you don't have to worry about them so much leaving. I mean, what I'm getting at here is if we redistrict, or when we redistrict, I suppose it's going to have to be when we redistrict.
Right.
Will it be able to stay that way for a while? Or do we have to worry about an instability? And what you just said is really interesting, because I remember a statement from one of our former board presidents relevant to the type of housing that was or wasn't available and where the low-income folks, where are they coming from? Now, what you just said about it predominantly being the lower grade levels, it's an awful lot easier to house a small child than a larger child, right? I mean, in terms of how many kids or how many families can you put in one dwelling? Sure. It becomes much more difficult as the kids become preteens and teens, to put two families in one building or 6 or 7 or 8 people in a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom home.
Right.
So those are the kinds of demographics that I would think about as to whether it influences the stability of what we end up doing.
Right. And over a decade period of time, neighborhoods change. At times you may have a great influx of young students coming in, and then a lot of times those neighborhoods end up being where families age in place, the children move on, but the mom and dad are still in the neighborhood. And so when people think sometimes we're doing this to cause heartache, trust us, we don't like this anymore than anybody else, because it does become a very highly sensitive and emotional issue to deal with. However, that's just the fact of life. Neighborhoods have changed over a period of time. The demographic information doesn't necessarily make sense. And there are other sensitivity factors that you have to take a look at, and it's the subgrouping. It's your African American population, your Hispanic population. If you take by neighborhoods, you would essentially have a school filled with African American or Hispanic. Is that the best learning environment, or would some people not agree with that perhaps being the best thing to do. Well, we know of other districts who that ends up turning into a lawsuit, of which you are then forced to mix your population.
Champaign, Rockford, and
Elgin. That's why you do have to take a look at all of those factors. You do want a balance of that throughout your district. And therefore, it's, there's reasons why this isn't done in 10 minutes or 2 days or 6 months. It's a lot of information to examine, to consider, and all these other factors really to really build upon. Can we say once we establish this is long lasting forever? No, because we know neighborhoods change. But in the long term of what we have seen, will it serve us best? We believe that it will, and because of issues we hadn't addressed before, such as the impetus of this was creating the boundary at Founders. Well, the minute you start doing that, it changes. You start moving parts and pieces, and eventually each school is affected by that shift. So with that, and I know there's a lot of information, we also have a timeline for you in your board docs. So in September is when Doug and I are doing a big initiative of just letting people know this is going to be forthcoming and alert all groups of folks from the interior and exterior stakeholders that this is going to be happening. We're going to create some forum dates of which we invite the community to come in, and that will be in November, if you look on the chart, of which we will present, actually, so we kind of walk through this. So September, we're talking about it just to alert people so that they know this is coming, so we can engage them. And they don't feel like this just happened overnight. And then in October, our leadership group will come back together as all of this information is refreshed with all of our new student enrollment. So
that's fall housing report, by the way.
Right. Our fall housing report by October is settled, so we take another look at all of that demographic information. We need to do another examination of where to house some of these programs, which will be addressing the middle school in that round. And then by November, we will have some options with some maps drawn to start sharing out, and that will be done at these forums. So people could see precisely where those boundary lines are, and we'll take feedback at that point in time. Then we will come back and see if any of the information that was shared with us, that we have to do some tweaking to those options, or if there was a resounding group of folks that were behind one plan or another plan. We will report back to the board in January, and then the board will have to take their vote in February. And the reasons, so you know why that's really like our deadline date, is by March and April, we open up registration, and we need to know what those boundaries will look like before we start registering our students. So that's somewhat of the timeline for all of this.
In our November community forums, we'll probably hold them just about every school. And didn't tell you this yet, Melissa, but you'll probably join us so we have notes, and so that we can then, once we get all the feedback from all the forums, we can synthesize it and put it in a clear form to let all you know the type of concerns that were brought about during those forums.
All right. Well, thank you.
Very well.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion now that Mary will be on vacation for our next board meeting. So I'm recommending that we appoint Vicki Favor as Secretary Pro Tem for that meeting, so that we have someone to take minutes during closed session and someone who can sign any resolutions that we need signed that night. So do I have a motion? No second. No second.
Second.
All right. Roll call, please.
Howard Feldman,
Yes.
Vicky Hearn in favor?
Abstain.
Mary Hess?
I don't know who I didn't. Can I vote yes? Or abstain? Yes.
Mary Moore?
It's a conflict of interest.
Victoria?
Yes. All right.
You think that's your own vacation?
Yeah. Okay. And with that, the meeting will be adjourned.
So moved.
Is there any- All in favor?
Aye.
Get in a little while.
I have